Stairs yesterday. Yeah. That's his name. He's looking at the lights. He's already started. Oh, this is too low.
Very cute. Okay. We are on 10B. Morning, Charles. Okay, we are on 10B2, the top of the page. The Mishnah says, someone who sits in a tent inside a sukkah, the Mishnah said, is not considered to be sitting in a sukkah, right? If you're in a sukkah and then you create a tent within a sukkah, that's not called sitting in a sukkah. You're sitting in a tent, and that tent is not a kosher sukkah. The tent, the ceiling of that tent is not schach of that. There's no proper schach. It's not a. It's the tent. The cover of the tent is made from materials that have the ability to accept tumah, to receive tumah, and therefore they can't be a. That's not a proper sukkah. So we have the concept that you could be in a sukkah, but you're not in a sukkah because you place some other contraption or some other structure you created within the sukkah, and that will invalidate. Just like we had the concept of if you have a sukkah on top of a sukkah, that we say that if you're in one sukkah on level 1, then you have a sukkah on top of level 1. Morning, Max. We said there's a special halacha that the bottom sukkah would be invalid. Similarly here, there's an invalidation of living in a tent that's within a sukkah. The Torah wants you to live in a sukkah. So that's not called living in a sukkah if you created a tent within the sukkah. So now the Gemara is going to explain other types of scenarios that have some resemblance of another structure within a sukkah, and at what point would we say that other structure is considered that would invalidate your sitting in a sukkah, or you're still considered, it's not considered that structure invalidates you from sitting in the sukkah. So that's what our Gemara now is going to be focused on. We are on 10B2. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Yehuda says the name of Shmuel, Mutar lishon b'kila b'sukkah. If you in a sukkah and you have a bed in the sukkah, which you're supposed to sleep in a sukkah, really ideally, first the law of sukkah is to eat, to drink, and sleep in a sukkah. And outside of Israel, many people, not everybody is sleeping in a sukkah, and then that's a question that the commentaries deal with. Why are people not sleeping in the sukkah? So people who don't sleep in the sukkah need to explain themselves. Why don't they sleep in a sukkah? Some say because the climate is very
Sakana.
Maybe the question is it sakana? Is it dangerous? The question, what's the sakana, Charles? Is the sakana because we're afraid of robbers? Is it sakana because of the weather? People shouldn't get sick. Sometimes it gets very cold at night. So some point to coldness of the weather here in the climate that we're living in that time of the year. So that's one of the, and we know when someone is mitzta'er, someone's distressed, if the sukkah, just like when it's raining and the rain comes into the sukkah and it will ruin your food, if there's enough rain that would come in and you're eating your soup and the rain would come into the soup it would ruin your soup, that you would be exempt from sitting in a sukkah if you're being distressed to that level. So too, if you're going to be very cold during the night, that's one of the reasons why people don't sleep in a sukkah. But here we're talking about a bed. They're talking about they in the time of the Gemara when we're discussing sukkah, they were all sleeping in the sukkah.
Everybody is sleeping in a sukkah. Now the question is, if you notice some of their beds, I recently, not so long ago, it's called what's called recent. In this past year, I visited a like a castle somewhere, and you see the type of beds that they had. That they have the beds with like a little canopy on top of the bed where they slept. That was common in the old days. So now the question is, can I sleep in that type of bed that has that canopy over it on Sukkot? Because the question is, am I really under the sukkah, under the schach? Or do we say now that I am sleeping under this canopy of the bed, I'm not under the sukkah, I'm not under the sukkah. There's some foreign object, that's foreign structure called this sheet that's the sheet that's across the top of the bed, that's on top of me, creates a separate type of tent, and maybe would that be a problem or not? That's the question in the Gemara. So comes Rabbi Yehuda Mashmuel and he says, Mutar lishon b'kila b'sukkah. You're allowed to go ahead and sleep in this kila, in this bed that has this canopy spread around the bed in the sukkah. Af al pi sheyesh lagat. Even though it comes to some sort of flat roof, it has some width of a flat roof, because we explained earlier in the Mishnah stated that if you have some sort of structure that only comes to a point, and it goes like this, goes on an angle, and it does not have a flat roof, that's not called a tent. We said it's not considered a tent. Wouldn't be a problem. The Mishnah says to sleep in such a type of structure in the sukkah, the Mishnah stated, because you don't.
Rabbi, what if?
Yes.
What if it's freezing and you immerse yourself under a blanket, fully covered under the blanket? Is that like you made a tent?
Great point. But since there's no real separation between you and the blanket is flush with you, so that's not considered a tent. A tent, there has to be a certain space between you and the item to be. So it's interesting that regarding tumah, regarding certain type for contamination, we find the concept. Let's say if you have, let's say, let's say you have a kazayit, a dead body under a canopy, or let's say there's a dead body, a person who passed away, and now someone puts a sheet above that dead body. And now the question is, then on the other side of the sheet, there's some utensils that are on the ground, which is also being covered by the sheet. So I think in order for that sheet to bring the tumah to the other side, to that other part, because technically, just like in a room, when someone comes into a room, if there's a dead body in the room, anybody, welcome back, Yehuda, Baruch haba, anybody who comes into the room becomes contaminated because the roof of that room is covering the dead body and also covering the person that walks into that room. Even though the person does not touch the dead body, but it's under the same canopy. But that type of thing, that canopy has to be, let's say, a tefach. A tefach has to be at least a tefach above there has to be a certain airspace in order for it to be considered a canopy, or else it doesn't have the rules of the canopy. So therefore, getting back to your case of a blanket here in the sukkah, since the blanket is flush with the person, it would not be a problem. We're going to even see later in the Gemara is going to say that we might have a different, you have to have a larger separation to be considered a proper tent. You have to have, let's say, maybe a separation of 10 tefachim. We're going to see more about that in the Gemara and discuss the details, how much separation, how much airspace does it have to be in order to be considered a tent. We welcome back Mr. Ajmi. Mark, we say hello to Mark.
Oh,
Good to see you, Mark. Okay.
Nice to see you.
Yes, good to see you. We just bring everybody up to date. We are on 10B2, Yudam Bet 2, on the top of the page. of Yehuda Mashmuel. So Yehuda Mashmuel just said a very nice chidush. His chidush was, and even though the Mishnah stated, the Mishnah spoke about a certain type of bed called a kinuf bed. The kinuf bed was a nice, strong bed with strong four posts coming up. Each corner is on the four legs of the bed. There were posts that came up, and they spread a sheet on top of that. On top of the four posts that came at the four corners of the bed. Correct. That was the Mishnah on Yud and Aleph, and the Mishnah stated that you cannot, if a person would sleep in a sukkah in such a bed that has these four posts and has this canopy that covers this sheet that goes across the four posts, the Mishnah stated that's no good. It's not, you're not sleeping in a sukkah, you're sleeping in a tent. And that tent, you have to sleep in a sukkah, that tent is not a kosher sukkah. So that's what the Mishnah stated. So with that being said, comes Rabbi Yehuda Mashmuel, and he talks about a different type of a bed. It's not a kinuf bed. We'll see maybe a little bit what the difference between this and a kinuf is. This type of bed, he says you could sleep in this bed in the sukkah, even though it has a canopy that's above you. The bed has a sheet that runs across the top of above you, a canopy over the bed. And even though it has a roof, even though we said to be something to be called a tent, it has to have a flatness, has to have like a flatness of a tefach, has to have about 3 to 4 inches flat, that's flat above you. But he says, even though it has this roof, it's not that it comes to an angle. It's not diagonally. It's not that it's going like this. It's not that it's going like a triangle. Even though there's a flat sheet on top. So Charles, here he says, as long as it's not 10 tefachim high, as long as the canopy, so some say it means from the bottom from the bed, from where the bed starts until the top of this bed, or some say from the ground until the top of the bed, as long as the canopy is not higher than 10 tefachim, so then you're good. It's not considered a real tent that will say as if you're not in the sukkah. For this structure, which is contained in a sukkah, you're in a perfect sukkah. But the problem is you have something else covering you, not directly flush with you, above you. You have a tent. For this, you have what's the tent? This cover of the bed that's running across the top of the bed. For it to ruin the bed, to ruin you, to say that you're not like it's like you're not in the sukkah. That bed, that cover has to be a 10 tefachim, a space of 10 tefachim between, let's say, the bed and that cover, or the ground and that cover that's above the bed. That's called a real tent. That's called a real structure of 10 tefachim. Then it would be considered a real tent that will invalidate your sleeping in the sukkah, and will consider it that you're not sleeping in the sukkah. So that's the right. So it wouldn't matter here. It wouldn't matter. Not only if it's peaked, there won't be a problem, and it doesn't come to a flatness. Even if there's a flatness on it, but as long as it's not 10 tefachim high, it cannot. It will not invalidate the sleeping in the sukkah. You're still considered in the sukkah. The way Rashi says it, we're not considering it that you're really in a tent. Not calling it, that's not a real tent. They have a new structure inside the sukkah, since it's lower than 10 tefachim high. Hashma. So the Gemara challenges this ruling of Shmuel, because Hashma, come in here, and we have a braita. What does the braita say? Hayoshein b'kila. Someone who sleeps in a kila. He's sleeping in this type of bed, and it has that cover above. If you look at your art scroll on the bottom, 10b2, on the picture on the bottom, see the bottom? That's like a kila. It has the cover on top, and you're sleeping inside of there. So what does the Gemara say? The Tashma. Hayoshem b'kila b'sukkah. If someone is sleeping in a kila on sukkah, lo yasi dechavoto. You did not fulfill your obligation. So what do we see, Yehuda? We see that we consider it a tent, the kila. So you just told me, and here the Gemara's understanding, the Breita did not say only if the tent is higher than 10 tvachim or more, only if this kila is more than, it says we call it stam. You're sleeping in a kila, it says, it's one area. It says if you're sleeping in a kila, you do not fulfill your obligation. Did it say, oh, that's only if it's 10 tvachim high? Didn't say it was only if it's 10 tvachim high. It says if you're sleeping in a kila, which indicates whether it's 10 tvachim high, whether it's not 10 tvachim high, and the idea would be because it comes to a flatness, it has a roof on top, it's considered a problem. It's considered a hefsek. It's considered an interruption between you and the schach. You're sleeping in some other structure. So the Gemara answers the question by saying, Hacha mayaskinon, the Breita that says that if you're sleeping in a kila is no good, which is the contradiction to Shmuel that says if you're sleeping in a kila is good, is because we're talking about Givoa Kishigavoa Asara. The Breita is talking about a specific case. When the kila, when that sheet that's going across the top, that's going horizontally across, is a problem, is because that kila of the Breita is 10 tvachim high. Since it's 10 tvachim high, that's the problem. Shmuel only said that you could sleep in a kila in a sukkah as long as that sheet, as long as that kila does not run a high, that structure is not a 10 tvachim. It's not 10 tvachim high. But if that's, but here the Breita that says that it's a problem, that's talking about, even though the Breita did not name that tomb, even though the Breita wasn't specific to say that's the case that we're talking about, the Gemara says Shmuel will obviously say that that's the case of the Breita. Meitivei. Now the Gemara challenges it from another case. Hayoshein tachat hamita b'sukkah. Someone, we have a Mishnah later on. The Mishnah says in the beginning of the second parak, someone sleeps under a bed. Let's say it's Sukkot, and you're gonna, you say, what, we don't have so much room in the Sukkah. So you know what we're gonna do? We'll have one guy sleep on the bed, and one guy sleep underneath the bed. That'll be, we'll see, right, Mr. Bitesh, we have a big party coming on. A lot of people, a lot of guests coming over, and all the men need to be in the Sukkah. So we'll have one guy is on top of it, one guy's underneath the bed. We'll use the space, like, space under bed is, it's a premium in Manhattan, right? People store a lot of stuff under the beds, right? Okay, Mr. Bitesh Ralph got the top, and I'm under it. So the question is, someone else got underneath the bed. So the question is, now, what about, now, the bed is in the sukkah. You're in the sukkah, but where are you? You're underneath the bed. Are you fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah? Well, you don't fulfill one assignment. Are you fulfilling the mitzvah of sukkah or not? Because you're under the bed. So what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says, well, you do not fulfill your mitzvah. Why not? Because if you're sleeping underneath the bed, so the bed, that means what's above you? The bed. The bed, the bottom of the bed is above you. Instead of having the schach above you, you have some other structure that's interrupting between you and the schach. And therefore, it says in the Mishnah Ariel, right, you're sleeping underneath, here's the bed, here's the bottom of the bed, the top of the bed, and you're underneath the bottom of the bed. And you have the whole flat bottom of the bed is interrupting between your body and the schach. So you're under some other structure. You're under a different tent. You're not under the schach. There's some other structure that's separating from you from the schach. So the Gemara says, Hatargam of Shmuel knew that. Morning, Mark. Shmuel knew that Mishnah. That's like a Mishnah. When you tell me a Breita, it's possible sometimes there's a Breita that maybe the rabbi didn't hear about, and we could explain the Breita. But Shmuel, when he went on record, when he said his law, he knew that Mishnah. Everybody knows the Mishnah. and he already explained that Mishnah that says that if you're sleeping under the bed, it's no good. That's only if the bottom of the bed is coming up 10 tefachim from the ground. It means the bed is a raised bed that you have, let's say 10 tefachim is anywhere between 30 and 40 inches. So let's say that bed, the bottom of the bed is 30 inches off the ground. Okay, it's not flat. So the Gemara was thinking in the beginning that bed it didn't say in the Mishnah how high that bed is, which would seem to indicate even if it's not 10 tefachim space between the ground and the bottom of the bed, it would be a problem. But no, so the Gemara Shmuel says that the problem of the bed is because the bed is 10 tefachim. It's considered a real tent. Having a structure, something covered with a space underneath of 10 tefachim, that's a nice size area that you covered, an area we have a space. Right, so here this case would be if the bottom of the bed to the ground, there's a space of 10 tefachim, so that would be considered a separate structure. Or if you would have a sheet above the bed that runs across the bed that's higher 10 tefachim than the bed, that also would invalidate, they're both interrupts. They're both considered an ohel. But both considered a separate tent that's separating you from the schach, that from the ceiling of the sukkah, that you have to be in a sukkah, not in a tent. It's not a kosher tent. It's not a kosher sukkah. That structure that you're in.
Rabbi, the 10 tefachim is from the floor or from your body? You're talking.
So there's two opinions. Rashi goes on record, and he says 10 tefachim. If you look at the Rashi, 10 tefachim from the bed. That means it would seem like from the bottom, from the bed, the mattress of the bed, or maybe the bottom of the bed. Rashi says the canopy above the bed is a problem if it's from the bed to the canopy is 10 tefachim. Rashi says it goes from the bed, and the other opinion, the opinion of other Rishonim, it's from the ground. As long as you don't count from the bed the 10 tefachim, you count from the ground the 10 tefachim. That's two different opinions exactly where the 10 tefachim is. So the Gemara says the following: Tashma, I have our Mishnah earlier. What does our Mishnah say? O sheperes al gabe kinofot. We said if he spread a sheet on top of these 4 posts that are on the bed, on the 4 corners of the bed, they put these 4 posts on the 4 corners of the bed, and then they went ahead and they spread. If you go back to the art scroll on 10A3, if you go back, flip the pages a few pages, 10A3, look at number 20. There's a picture in number 20, right? That is a kinof. That's a bed. The bottom there is the bed. And then you have the 4 corners, the 4 posts, and then you have the sheet running across. And what does the Mishnah say about such a thing? Moshe Peres al gabi kinofot. It says if you spread that sheet across those posts, right? It's psulah, right? Yehuda, am I correct? It says it's psulah. It says that that is an invalid place to be. You can't be sleeping inside over there because you're sleeping in a tent, not in a sukkah. So, and again, the Gemara's understanding, the Mishnah did not say how high was that sheet that you spread across those 4 posts. It would seem to indicate from the language of the Mishnah whether the sheet was 10 tefachim above you or whether the sheet was 6 tefachim. Even if it wasn't so high, it would be considered an interruption. So what does the Gemara say? So the Gemara says, by the way, Ariel, I don't know if anyone sent to the group. If you want to remind the group that we're on. Okay, good morning, Yosef. So the Gemara says, morning, Hasam Nami, the Gemara says, Hasam Nami, Gvi Asara. You have to say, that case of the Mishnah is also talking when the sheet was spread 10 tefachim above. There was an airspace of 10 tefachim, or there was a structure was 10 tefachim high, and we'll go with Rashi's pshat, let's say from the bottom, from the bed until the canopy, there was 10 tefachim. So since there was 10 tefachim, that's why the Mishnah stated it's a problem. So the Gemara says, but you know what? I have a question on that answer. You want to say that it's a 10 tefachim case. You want to say that the height is 10 tefachim, and that's why it's a problem. But if it would be less than 10 tefachim, if there would be this type of bed, and I have a sheet running on top of the bed, top across above, it's like a canopy over the bed, as long as it's not 10 tefachim high, it would be fine. So I have a question. Why? The Tanya, we learned in a Braita, naklitin. The naklitin bed, the Mishnah spoke about on Yudam and Aleph on 10a, the Mishnah spoke about a naklitin, right? The Mishnah says you could spread a sheet over a naklitin. Now, what is a naklitin? So if you go look back at the picture on 10a3, you'll have a picture of a naklitin. On the right side, you see the naklitin on the right side? So you have, it's like a triangle bed. It's number 22. It has 2 vertical posts. Now that bed doesn't have a roof that's flat on top. That bed comes to a point. And being that's the case, it's not called a tent. It looks like a tent, but it's not a tent. To be considered a halachic tent, it has to have some sort of flat cover. If a tefah, it has to be a minimum of a tefah. If it doesn't have a minimum of a tefah on top, if the top goes like this without going like this, it's a problem. Sorry, it's not it's not called a tent. That's what the Mishnah stated. Okay, the Mishnah stated that you could sleep in that type of bed on Sukkah, in the Sukkah, even though you're in this other structure, this naklite structure, you have a canopy above you, but the canopy comes to a point and it's not flat, it's not a horizontal canopy, it's not horizontal, it doesn't come across, so therefore it is fine. That is fine. That's what the Mishnah said before. Now, the Braita comes and says the following. Niklitin is shnayim. If you remember that picture, it's 2 posts. In the middle of the bed, on one end is 1 post, and the other end is another post, and then you stick the sheet, and then it comes to this, there's only 2 posts, and therefore, because it's only 2 posts, it's not coming to a flat top. However, the kinofot is arba'ah. The kinofot has 4 posts. At the 4 legs of the bed, there's above each leg comes a post running across. Now, Pires al gabe kinofot, it says, if you place the sheet above the canopy, the sheet you place on top of the kinofot, sula. We said this 4-cornered, 4-pole bed, if you go ahead and you place a sheet that runs across, it's invalid. Al gabe niklitin, but if you placed it on top of niklitin, which we say is those only 2 posts, and it does not come to a flat roof, so we say kishera. It is kosher. We say, good morning. If you place it on part of the niklitin, we said because it doesn't have a roof, a flat roof, it's kosher. But now comes the Braita and adds a point that's not in the Mishnah. Ubelvad shelo yihu niklitin gevoa min amita asara. That which we say that it is good that you could spread this canopy over this two posts, this bed that has 2 posts, and it comes to a corner on top, angle on top. That's only if this niklitin bed is not higher 10 tefachim. The height, the top of this structure of that, the 2-post bed, which is like a triangle bed. So we're saying that the two posts, so what's the, so no, we're saying like this. The two, so let's explain. The two post bed is good as long as it's not 10 tefachim high. But the 4 post bed is no good even if it's not 10 tefachim high. That's the what's the contrast? Because we said in the Mishnah there's a difference between a kinov and a niklitin. The kinov, the 4 posts, we call it the 4 posts. There was an opinion that said before, the Gemara said before, right? Shmuel said you can be up to a kila, you can have up to 10 tefachim, you're good. So the Gemara's question is, a kila, the Gemara is comparing at the moment a kila bed to a kinov bed. One is the similar, they're both just 4 posts, and they both have a sheet running across. So the Gemara at this point did not make a distinction between a kila and a kinov. You have the 4 posts, you got the sheet running across, and Shmuel said, a kila, 4 posts, as long as it's not a 10 canopy of 10 tefachim, you're good. That's what Shmuel said. That's the question right now. The question right now is, we see from the kinov that if it's a 4-posted bed and it comes across, even if it's not 10 tefachim high, it's no good. And you said you can have up to 10 tefachim. That is the contradiction. Meaning, a nikliti bed, as long as it's not 10 tefachim, you're good. A kinov, even if it's not 10 tefachim, it's no good. So that's the question. That's the Gemara's going to bring now the Gemara's going to speak out the question. Yes. Flat top, it would be no good, even if it's not 10 tefachim high. That's the question of Shmuel. Shmuel came into the Beit Midrash, and he says, you know what? You could sleep in a kila bed. You could sleep in a kila bed, which goes across, as long as it's not 10 tefachim high. And now the Gemara is challenging, and we found the Mishnah talks about a kinov. It has 4 posts, something going across, and it says there's a problem, even though it's not 10 tefachim high. Now, how do we know it's even not 10 tefachim high? Because there's a contrast between the nikliti and the kinov. The nikliti is good up to 10 tefachim. In the same case, the nikliti is good, the kinov is not good. Michlal, the kinofot, the kinofot, even if it's not 10 tefachim high, it's no good. Because you're telling me the nikliti is good as long as it's not 10 tefachim high. Good morning, Mr. Feldman, welcome back. So that's the Gemara's question. So we're talking about, and if you're in a sukkah, if you're sleeping in it, which if you're supposed to really, the halacha was that you're supposed to sleep in a sukkah. It's all different discussions. Why aren't people sleeping in a sukkah today? You need a heter, you need an explanation for yourself if you're not sleeping in a sukkah. Ideally, everyone should try to see if they could sleep in a sukkah. Would be the most ideal thing. Okay, I don't know, deal is people sleeping in the sukkah and deal? Some people aren't. It's ideal. It's ideal to sleep in the sukkah. Okay, so everybody, I strongly suggest that if you can make it work, I think it's a beautiful. Every second you're in the sukkah, you get a mitzvah. Every second you're sleeping for however the longer you sleep, the more mitzvah you have. That's one time it's good to sleep late. I don't know. Shouldn't really sleep too long. You know, Vadi Yosef says one of the concerns about sleeping too many hours in the morning or sleeping by the day is because bittul Torah. Instead of learning, I just sleep. You're able to learn and you're sleeping. But here it's interesting. You're not learning Torah, but at least you're doing a mitzvah. So the Gemara is saying if you go into a bed, and they used to have certain canopies above the bed. The question would that canopy be considered an interruption that's not considered you're sitting under the Succah? But you have this type of, you have to remove the canopy when you're sleeping in that bed during the duration of Sukkot, or you don't have to remove that canopy. So that's what the Gemara is discussing, and the Gemara is discussing different types of beds, different types of canopies, depending how the canopies will go. If they came to an angle, they came to a point, or they were flat. Now the Gemara is questioning the from the case of Kinov, because we found Shmuel went on record and says Akila, it's a type of, you have these posts at the bed and you spread a sheet across. He said as long as this structure is not 10 tefachim high, it's not going to be considered a real tent that is interrupting your sleeping in the sukkah. And the Gemara's questions are from our Mishnah, from this Breita, that seems to indicate that if it's a flat canopy going across, even if it's not 10 tefachim high, it would be a problem. It would be considered an interruption. But the Gemara answers because that's not, it's a different type of bed. The Gemara says, shiny kinov. because a kinof, the way they make the kinof, it's the kvi'i. The posts are very strongly the structure secure, and when something which is a real secure structure, that type of structure, even if it's not 10 tefachim high, even if the height it's not covering a space. The largest space that you cover makes you more of a structure, right? The more that you're covering, it makes it's a nice tent. You got a nice tent over there. You put up a little nothing, doesn't really cover too much. It's less of a tent. But if you're a real structure, if you're a strong structure, you're strong. So even if you're not that high, but you're considered a structure, and therefore that would be considered an interruption between you and the schach, because you're under this canopy of a strong structure, and that will interrupt your sleeping in the sukkah. Okay, so now the Gemara says, "V'harei sukkah gabe sukkah." The Gemara says, there's a halacha that says you learned about that if you're in one sukkah, and then on top of the sukkah you built another sukkah, and we said that the bottom sukkah is not kosher. If you're going to be sleeping and living and eating and drinking in the bottom sukkah, but there's another sukkah directly above your sukkah. Let's say your schach is like the ground for the next sukkah. The bottom sukkah is not kosher. The top sukkah would be kosher. You could be living in the top sukkah, but you can't live in the bottom sukkah. So the Gemara's question is, right. So that's the Gemara's question. The bottom, when you have a sukkah on top of a sukkah, it's right. The sheet is not schach, right? But the structure of if you're going to have a sukkah on top of a sukkah, we're talking about something that's pretty strong. To be able to be a structure on top of something else would have to be something that you made a sukkah with walls, and it's a pretty set thing. Nevertheless, for that top structure to invalidate the bottom structure, the bottom sukkah, the top structure has to be 10 tefachim high. Higher than its floor, meaning the height of the set of the top. It has to be a real sukkah. In order for the top sukkah to invalidate the bottom sukkah, it has to be a real structure of 10 from the bottom of the top sukkah. Again, you have the top from the floor of the top sukkah to the ceiling of the top. So the schach has to be a minimum of 10 tefachim but if it's not a 10 tefachim, if the top sukkah is not a 10 tefachim structure, it will not invalidate the bottom. So the Gemara has a question. If you say something that's permanent, it's considered something that's really a separation, so that top sukkah, which is permanent, should invalidate the bottom. Why is it that Shmuel says the only way it validates the bottom is the top sukkah has to be 10 tefachim high? And we'll leave everybody with the question. And everyone have a great day. If the top sukkah would not be, if the top sukkah would not be able to be used at all, then it's not called, then it's not a sukkah. And it wouldn't validate. That's correct.
But Rabbi, how can you do the floor?
Let's say you have long walls, and you have a long wall, and you put schach, one level of schach this way, and then you have long wall. You have a 20-foot wall, and you place you place schach there. All right. The Gemara discussed. Okay. Have a great. Thank you, Mr. Feldman. Yosef, welcome everybody to be here. Yes, Yosef.
In order to create a sukkah under, you have to have like a glass floor or something like that, clear. Right?
In order to create a sukkah, say that again.
If you want to create a sukkah above other sukkah, you have to have a floor.
Right. So maybe the floor was, let's say, very strong bamboo. You may have strong bamboo running across. And and most probably that was your floor. Morning.
Okay, so
morning.
that first of all, you have to have like about 80% covered only. That's the rules. You cannot have more than 80% covered, because if it's like more than 80%, then you cannot see the sky and it's become non-kosher.
I mean, again, the schach has to be. You have to cover the whole ceiling has to be covered with schach. We don't leave empty area in the sukkah. Even when you have schach, there's always spaces. Great day, Max. Always spaces between. We have to make sure the schach covering the whole sukkah. We don't leave any. We're not supposed to leave.
I'm saying you cannot put schach that it's too tight that you cannot see the sky. You have to see the sky from the sukkah.
You always. I'm saying, but there's always spaces between poles and different things that you can. A lot of times, unless you have a lot of multiple layers of schach, when you have one layer of schach running across, there's always spots to see the sky. You don't need to see the sky in a real open way that there's a real space. You're not supposed to have spaces in your sukkah. The schach is supposed to cover the whole area, the whole sukkah. You're supposed to have schach across.
You can have the schach so tight that you cannot see the sky.
I'm saying usually the schach is never so tight that you're not going to see the sky. You'll always
imagine those bungalows that they're putting the schach on top of the roof as they become to be the roof, so the water will not come inside. It's only natural, plum trees, that can last for many years, but it's tight. Is that kosher will be?
Okay, how tight? What is the schach that they're using? They're using mats. What are they using? What type of mats made out of straw? What are they using? Kosher
from plum trees. For the plum trees.
Okay, but even what is it? It's bamboo. It's branches. What is it?
It's the leaf of the palm tree.
Okay, so usually there's spaces. There's a little space here, a little space there.
But if you layer them up, there is no space. If you layer like 2-3 layers.
Okay, so we're gonna have to learn more about that. What's the halacha? If there's more layers, we'll learn more about that. But we'll have to wait and see more in that halacha. Remind me more about that. Okay.
Okay, and can you do also the roof of the sukkah in angle, like a roof of the house?
It seems so far. It seems yes, but we'll have to see more about that. We'll have to look more into that, Yosef.
Okay.
We'll see if to see more. I think that's a Gemara earlier that we didn't do yet, because we had skipped that Gemara. We're going to get back to it. If you look at the Gemara on, I think on Testament base 8.
It doesn't matter where.
Okay, we have that here. Zion on the base. It seems from that Gemara that it would be good, even if it doesn't come to, even if it's made like on an angle. But we have to see more the halacha. Okay, we have to check out the halacha. And I want to wish you a great day. I'm going up to Davin now, Yosef. Great to see you.
All right, likewise, Rabbi. Thank you.